Hello, you're watching the Great Canadian Bagel here, and today we have another Canada federal election forecast update. Now, before I begin, I want to once again shout out all my new channel members. I really appreciate you guys supporting the channel, and if you guys want to support the channel, by all means go and link in the description below and join up, press the join button. I will just note that there is supposed to be Discord integration for the Everything Bagel tier. It doesn't seem to work, so I put community posts out that are members only for that tier. So just look there and you should get the invite link there. If you don't, just comment on the video and I'll make another post. With that though, make sure you do all your regular YouTube things. Like, share, subscribe, and comment below. And with that, let us begin. So, I kind of ran out of time here. It turns out I don't know why I did this, but I got every single timestamp wrong for my debate section. I don't know how I managed to do that, but I did. Maybe I looked up like wall time or something. I don't know. So I might come back here. If people comment below if you want me to come back here in like a day or two, like later this week, maybe like Friday, and publish debate upgrades V2 with clips. But I do not have time, as of recording this video, to figure this out because all of my timestamps are wrong. I'm going to probably watch the entire debate again to get the timestamps correct. I don't know how every single timestamp is wrong, but they're all wrong. But I can still do grades. Because I have the notes, I have what happened, so it's not that important. So let's get into it. This is going to be very brief. If you want a more long form one, comment below and I'll do a more long form one later. So, refresher. This is what the rubric looks like. That doesn't look good. There you go. Look at this. So, C is the grade you get for being acceptable. To be generic is a C. To be good, you gotta be your A's. And you're graded on several points. And I will also note that this is an objective rating based off of skill in debate. Skill in debate does not always correlate to who won a debate. So just because someone here might or may not have the best grade, they may or may not have won the debate. I will go and discuss after this in my video of who and why I thought won the debate. So let's start off with Mark Carney, because he is the first in my list over here. So, Carney achieved a solid C for stayed on message. He stayed on message. That is congratulations. He did it. He had no particular fumbles. I wouldn't say he made any mistakes. He opened himself up for any notable attacks. He was attacked a lot, but nothing that was from his own doing. But I will say, in this debate, he was almost a terrible orator. I'm going to give him a little better than that. I will say he's like a D- bad orator. His oration was horrific. So much worse than the leadership debate in the Liberal Party. He was wordy, he was unclear, unfocused. I have really no idea what he was trying to say with most of his answers. It was really hard to listen to him. And oftentimes, he didn't really answer the question, but it's not like he didn't answer the question because he intentionally ignored it to say something else, which is fine. He ignored the question, he didn't really answer the question, but he said a whole lot of words. I didn't really say anything with it. So the oration was horrible. One of the worst performances on oration I've seen in a debate in a while. So, D-. He has some good replies to questions, and he has some good attacks. He has one good attack with Poilievre on gun control. And I don't have timestamps, so I'm not going to play the clip, but I'd do it later if you want me to. So I would say he was probably at a B for attacks. He really has no good moments, so he's going to just get a wash on that. So he's a C. So he has 2 C's for no fumbles, stayed on message. He has a B for a good attack, and he has a D- for being on message. So that altogether gives him a C- grade. Almost borderline a D+. The only reason it's not a D+ is because when he wanted to, he did give good answers. But a lot of the time, he didn't give a good answer. It was too wordy, too mealy-mouthed. Wasn't very good. So going on, Poilievre. Poilievre was articulate and was concise with his speaking, so his oration was quite good. I skipped some steps here. Sorry. Poilievre stayed on message. He had no fumbles. There we go. Poilievre was articulate and concise with a lot of his answers. And he did a really good rhetorical trick, or oratory trick, because he was specifically like addressing the audience. He was ignoring the clown show from singing behind him, and he was really focusing on giving his message straight to the audience. And while he did do attacks, he wasn't really that focused on attacking for the most part. He was more focused on saying his message, and you could see that. And he does parry quite well. So I would say he was a B, a good orator. I would not say he's great, but definitely passable. He had quite a few relatively good attacks. One particular really good attack was on him using Trudeau staffer notes. There's a couple other ones here that I didn't summarize very well, but again, you get the point. So I would say he's probably in like the A level, but low A, so like maybe like an A- for multiple blows. And he does have a moment. Now, he technically has 2 moments, one of which is irrelevant in the sense that it has no bearing on debate skills. It's just kind of funny. It went mimetic, but I don't think it really has any impact, which is during the end of the debate, Carney asked him about the security clearance, and the way he said gagged sounded like gay. So he said he would be gay if he got... It sounded like he said he would be gay if he got a clearance, but what he actually did say was gagged. But that went viral, so that was a moment. But the better moment, and the actual one that is relevant to the discussion of a debate, was saying that he attacked Carney, saying, "You are more focused on protecting turkeys than you are protecting people." I don't recall the exact phrasing. If you care, comment below, and I'll do a video where I actually play the clip. But that was a good moment, so I'll give that a B. So, with a B good moment, a B landed blows. B good moment, B oration, A- landed on blows. I'll give him a B+ overall. Then we get to, I'll skip Blanchet for a second. We're going to go straight to Singh. Let's look at my order here. Singh struggled to stay on message. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say he failed to stay on message. I have no idea what his message was in this debate. I don't know what he was trying to sell his voters. It makes no sense to me. He was all over the place. It felt like maybe he was trying to drag things to healthcare, but none of the debate topics in question were about healthcare. And when he tried to bring it to healthcare, he didn't really say anything useful. So, complete failure here. He did not stay on message. The debate topics were known beforehand. He really should have formulated his message around the topics at hand. Or at least made it easier to work it in. Even when he had free time to say something, he completely failed messaging. Awful. His oration was mediocre. A lot of time he sounded a little wild, a little unkempt. He wasn't in his best position. He wasn't in like a good mind state. Maybe he was stressed going into the debate, which kind of threw him off a bit. But I wouldn't degrade him too much on that. I think I'll put him like a C. Singh has historically been a better orator than this, but his overall performance today wasn't, or in that debate, the English debate, wasn't great. He was clear and concise, but his word choice, his demeanor, his presentation wasn't very good. So that's going to balance out to a C. He's articulate, relatively concise, usually well-spoken, but the rest of it, the performance of the oration wasn't well. So a C. He had a lot of attacks. He was attacking constantly. Pretty much everybody on the stage kept interrupting people. But overall, I would say it was decent. I'd give him honestly like a B+. Like, he didn't have multiple good blows, but he didn't land more than one blow. They just weren't good. So I'll give him a B+ on that. And he really, I wouldn't say he had any meaningful moments. Like, as far as I can tell, this is the moments is probably the most dubious category. But nothing what he did seemed to have went viral. Wasn't mimetic. No one really paid attention or remembered what he did. So he's getting a solid B. Or, sorry, nilch on moments. So with an F on messaging and a B+ on this, he is at a D+ overall. He had a terrible performance in that debate. Completely forgettable. Completely awful. Blanchet stayed on message. Congratulations. And this is where Blanchet, I think, is quite interesting. I am not grading on a curve here. So Blanchet is at a huge disadvantage. He's in a second language debate here. I'm not grading on a curve. And his oration was quite good. There were a couple times he gets tongue-tied in English, where he doesn't really quite know what he wants to say. But when he is on point, he's speaking well, he's articulate, he's concise, he makes good points, he's calm, he has a good demeanor, he looks in control. These are all good things. So I'm going to give him a B on oration. He has a flurry of good attacks. This guy has just fantastic attacks across the board on pretty much everything. So he's going to get an A+ for multiple blows. He is like, this is probably a good case study for attacks. He really couldn't have attacked more. If he attacked more, he would have to have spoken more. And with the amount of minutes he spoke, he could not have done more attacks. And they were all good, for the most part. And I would say he had a moment. It's right at the end of the debate. When he attacks Carney for corruption. And there's another one just a little bit after that, when he speaks directly to the audience in his final statement in French. Those aren't amazing moments, but they are moments. They did get a little bit of traction elsewhere. A little more so in French media, from what I can tell. But I'll give him a B on those. So he has 2 Bs with he had moments. He was a good orator. And an A+ in attacks. So overall, I think I have to give him an A-. So overall here, by my rubric, by my grading, Blanchet won the debate. And as we're going to cue into the next segment here, Blanchet won the debate. How can I say that? Now, I will put a lot of caveat on this. At the time of recording this, it is the 21st as of time of recording. More polls could come out. They could change things. But the data I have access to right now, Blanchet won the debate. Why did Blanchet win the debate? Well, what does it mean to win a political debate? To win a debate, it would mean that you gained ground, you gained seats, you gained vote share. And we open this up. Blanchet gained 1.14% and 11 seats week over week. And I will note too, without hiding this, the bloc was in a negative trajectory and just turned around. That is what winning a debate can do. It's early yet. There's still 7 days left in the election at the time of recording this. But there is a very distinct possibility that Blanchet just single-handedly denied the Liberal majority again. That is how powerful winning a debate can be. It pretty much just saved the bloc. And now the question is here, where does this go? Where does the election trend? Oh, I did not mean to do that. Here we go. We zoom in a bit here. What I think it seems pretty likely is some of these outskirt, like Montreal suburb ridings, some of these southern Quebec ridings, will probably flip back, pardon me, bloc over the next couple weeks, or next week. I think you could very well see 4, 5 more seats go back to the bloc, which put them at like 33-ish. They'll probably get 7, 8% maybe. 7.5% perhaps. And that might put the Liberals down to 171, which is a minority. And it's also possible that in other areas you could see things continue to tighten. I do think, just on polling trajectory, we are going to see the Conservatives gain a little bit more, the Liberals lose a bit more. Because while Blanchet won the debate, Poilievre definitely did better than Carney, and I think that is going to help him in a lot of places. A lot of his favorabilities are turning around. If you look at Abacus, you look at Main Street, his favorabilities are turning around. The Trump issue, as I touched at earlier in the election, is fading off in primacy. It's not as big of a concern. It's not the #1 concern anymore. It's going back to cost of living. These are things that are good for Poilievre and bad for Carney. The question just boils down to, is there enough time for this to occur? And that's hard to say. And the other question to be had here is, in the event we see a Liberal minority, or plurality, but not a majority, how does that election go? Who forms government? And with that, historically in Canada, it's very difficult for the for the Conservatives to form minority governments, usually. It requires, for the most part, every other party not wanting to work together. But with the NDP nearly 0 seats, in the bloc under Blanchet, especially with the PQ under Plamondon, moving more to the social conservative side. Cultural conservative is probably a better way to phrase that. In the sense that they're trying to preserve Quebecois culture more than like particular social policies. I do think it's actually more likely you'll see Blanchet prop up the Conservatives given the opportunity. Especially because recently, as of time of recording this, I think it was to this day, Carney announced that he is going to maintain about 1% of the population as new permanent residents every year. 420,000 as of today, allegedly, or apparently. That's far too high for the bloc. I can't think of a situation where Blanchet, given the option, would vote confidence or even abstain from a vote if that is the option. And Poilievre's offering to cut immigration down Immigration is a very big issue in Quebec, especially among the type of Quebecer who vote Bloc Québécois. So we might see a kind of a funny situation here, whereas historically, again, the Bloc usually abstains from confidence motions unless they want the government to end. They might actually affirmatively vote for the Conservatives if that option is at the table. And it might be at the table, it might not be at the table. It's really hard to say right now. The Liberals do have a lead. And there is one more wrinkle here. Many people have commented before, and I've kind of brushed it off, but this is a thing. The NDP are not going to get 0 seats. My model says 0 seats, but it says that more because there's no natural NDP seats left in Canada at this vote share, at this kind of votes distribution. There's no natural NDP seats. But you'll probably see things like Alex Boulerice, maybe McPherson, maybe someone in Vancouver, maybe Hamilton Center kind of thing. You could see some of these seats hold out for the NDP, and not because the NDP should win that seat, but because the local candidate has that much appeal. Now, normally local candidates are irrelevant, for the most part. Like, yes, in reality, they can cause... The rule of thumb is like a really, really good candidate, really, really good local campaign can usually move about 8 points towards your party. But every now and then, you will have a candidate who's just so good, so well-liked, that they're bulletproof. They can't lose. An example of this recently in Nova Scotia was Ian Rankin. He's so well-liked in Prospect Timberley area that there's just no universe where he could lose. And in fact, in an election where the Nova Scotia Liberal Party got all but wiped out, and by all accounts, if you do not account for his unique local appeal, he should have lost by a lot. He gained votes and vote share. There's other ones like that. You can look at historical elections in Quebec. Quebec provincial election, there is one candidate who runs in like Rimouski area for the Parti Québécois. And this guy gets like 60-70% of the vote in pretty much every single election. Because he's that well-liked. Doesn't matter if the PQ is getting almost wiped out. He wins. He doesn't lose his seat. So it does happen. And I think you're going to see some NDP MPs hold this out and actually win these seats. I don't know which ones, though. I have given a lot of these candidates boosts. I'm not assuming that they're just vanilla. But the degree of boost I would need to give is kind of farcical, and I don't really have a good way to estimate how much I should give. Because again, when you're talking about losing like 60% of your vote share, you're doing really bad. By all accounts, you should lose everywhere, pretty much. But that's not the case. Ish. Now, one thing I will say with that as well is if you do see the NDP holding on to some seats, it will likely remove seats equally from the NDP, or so the Liberals and the Conservatives. So if the NDP has 8 seats, it'll probably be like 3 or 4 seats from the Conservatives, 3 or 4 seats from the Liberals. Kind of deal. So it will likely make it easier for the Liberals to form government the more seats the NDP wins. Even though a lot of those seats the NDP is going to win, my model currently forecasts as being won by the Liberals, many of them will come from the Conservatives. It's just there's no good way to estimate them. I know 338 does, but I'm not sure what black magic he's using. I'm not saying he's wrong. I just don't know how he arrived at these results. In fact, he's probably right, more right than I am, with the NDP seats. But I've thrown my hands up. I don't know how to deal with it. And the other one that people constantly comment on is Kitchener Center. Kitchener-Center is like a four-way race right now in my model. And I just want to remind people, the margin of error on these ridings is like 8%. So, like, yeah, I'm showing the Conservatives leading, but it's really a toss-up. It could be anyone winning that riding right now. There's really no good way to guess. They're leading, perhaps, but not much. So overall here, I'll keep this one short because I'm expecting people want to see the debate video in more detail. But, I forgot one thing. I am doing a poll. And this will be a final poll for the election. It's going to be pinned in the pinned comment below in the video. By all means, go check that out. Fill it out if you haven't already. Many of you might have already filled it out. Many of you on my mailing list and all that stuff. But make sure you fill that out. Send it with your friends and family so they fill it out too. But I'll leave this one. Do with this. The trajectory is narrowing. There is some noise to be had. But if we say we're to compare this to the Wikipedia chart, this chart, I think this chart is really misleading. I don't know what the Wikipedia editors are doing to weight this. I would put a lot of salt on this. This chart is extremely misleading to me. I think it's much better to look at my modeling, even 338. If you look at 338 here, you can kind of see this. It is narrowing. It's not, he's not showing a massive narrowing, but it is, especially when you compare it to early April. It's a lot closer, 5 points. This was 7. So it's definitely narrowing. That's without doubt. The question is really just at this stage, can it narrow enough for it to matter? We're no longer looking at an election where a Conservative majority is possible, barring a really big poll miss. What you're looking at is an election where individual ridings, individual turnout rates is going to matter. When you start looking at barely majority territory, especially when it's very likely that the only other parties with seats are likely going to not support your government in a minority, it gets very, very tight. And my model does mostly account for this, but I do think, especially in Atlantic Canada, you are going to see quite a big poll miss because polarized rural areas do not get captured very well. So, in places like Atlantic Canada, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, you're going to probably see polls miss more. Whereas Ontario, it's going to be less. And Quebec, it might be bang on. Polling in Quebec is usually really good because one of the main sources of polling error is this rural-urban polarization because it's really hard to capture polarized rural areas. And Quebec is not very polarized on urban-rural. It's very polarized on language, but it's not very polarized on urban-rural. The Conservatives do as good in urban as they do in rural in Quebec. Bloc as well. Liberals do a bit better in urban, but that's because that's where most of the English speakers are. And they do really well with English speakers in Quebec. So there is a bit of a wash there, but for the most part, Quebec is really accurate for federal polling. Ontario is relatively accurate, also because Ontario usually has the much larger sample size, so the margin of error is a lot lower. it's these other 7 provinces, well, 8, sorry, that you see more polling error. Because smaller sample sizes, these 3 have very polarized rural areas. BC's trending to be polarized rural areas. And Atlantic Canada is trending to be polarized rural areas. New Brunswick, for example, has polarized liberal and conservative rural areas. So a very minor polling miss, like sampling mess up in New Brunswick, can wildly change results on a federal level. Because on a provincial level, you can catch that because you can weight by region. But nationally, we don't usually weight New Brunswick by region. So if you get too many people from Bathurst relative to Woodstock, it'll throw off your New Brunswick sample a lot. And I think the same thing's going to be true in PEI, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland to a similar extent. There's going to be a lot more polarized areas in the rurals compared to the urbans. For example, Halifax region I expect to be quite liberal. But rural Nova Scotia I expect to be very blue, relatively speaking. Some places, like down here in like Argyll or Barrington, municipalities, those could be like 80%, 90% conservative. That's how conservative some of these rurals could be. And that's not just idle speculation. In 2021, the Conservatives won 85% of the vote in Argyll municipality. They won 76% in Shelburne County in 2021. And fisheries and fishing areas in small towns in rural Nova Scotia have only polarized more to the Conservatives, especially because the Conservatives are running out policies pro those areas and the Liberals are not talking about those areas. So there is some potential for a big poll miss, but it's not certain. And it could not matter. Because again, just because I'm saying this more likely you're going to see a miss in these areas doesn't mean the miss is going to favor the Conservatives. It's not necessarily the case. Because you also see a lot of poll misses in very deep urbans. Like the GTA. Like Greater Vancouver. Like Montreal. Where's that? Montreal. Up here. So you could end up seeing a situation where there's a big poll miss in the Liberals' favor in Ontario. BC's a wash, and the Conservatives get dictator margins in rural Alberta and Saskatchewan. Like 90% to 10 or something stupid. And that could be a really huge poll miss that has no impact on the election. But I do think it's very likely that this election, because of realignment, because different areas are trending very differently, there's going to be a lot of misses. And I'm fully expecting I will have a pretty subpar performance this election. I could do really well, maybe. But I'm expecting to do quite poorly for me. So like maybe like 75 to 85 range. I like to be north of 90% for a seat hit rate, but I'm expecting it to be much worse. Because the last time we had an election where these two parties were at 80% was a very, very long time ago. Much before I was born. The last time any party in Canada was above 40 was 2000. And the last time we saw this much underlying movement, so for example, like East Asians and South Asians are moving quite a lot, according to the polls that show data on this. A whole lot could happen here. Or nothing could happen. Hard to say. But I'll leave that there. Just comment below if you want me to do a proper debate video when I have time later this week. But with that, I bid you guys adieu, and I'll see you next week.